I don't think it would be too big of a stretch to say that the human mind is the worst trap of them all. Mine certainly is. I am sometimes scared of what lurks down in the deep labyrinthine corridors of this 1.3 kilogram mass of neural tissue that some claim ownership over, and others see themselves as. Maybe if I pass all these thoughts on to you, they will stop screaming so loudly. Maybe if I bring someone with me, I won't get lost in the corridors. If not, I might as well enjoy it, and try to bring some of this enjoyment to you. Disclaimer: the content of this video contains reference to and discussions of sensitive topics, including psychological torture, solitary confinement, substance abuse, violence, and existential horror. Viewer discretion is advised. The purpose of this video is to explore and discuss these themes within the context of various media and is not intended to condone or promote any form of harmful behavior or actions. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health issues or experiencing distress, please seek professional help and support. Also, this video will make reference to or will outright spoil this media. Presentable Liberty, Warhammer 40k, The Jaunt by Stephen King, and Katana Zero. If prior knowledge of the story the artwork presents is going to negatively impact your experience with it, I advise you to first play, watch, or read all the media presented. Your brain is like a lake that lives a life mostly thanks to the outside world. Rain, wind, a river flowing into it, maybe a boat or a bird. There is always outside disturbances, and so the lake always moves. There is always something going on. The lake likes it this way, but sometimes there comes an unlucky moment when the lake loses the movement and stands still. The water stops flowing, none in, none out. And so, boredom is what you feel when you have no outside input to your brain, which traps you inside your own mind. The less there is outside, the more you are forced to look inward or to create an illusion of an outside. And there is no denying that it's painful. It's with us every day of our lives, from our very first moment to our last breath. Our brain always tries to minimize it, so whenever you're bored, you're compelled to do something, anything, just to shake off this feeling. A lot of the time, when there is nothing to do, you think of things you wouldn't think of otherwise. For example, in the shower, you're focused on your own body, which doesn't take up that much of your mental capacity. And so you think your shower thoughts. Some of the weirdest thoughts you ever thought. You could say that boredom increases creativity. So just like every other feeling, it is useful. But just like every other feeling, it becomes harmful when there is too much of it. Prolonged periods of boredom can cause harm to both mental and physical health of a person that varies in severity by how much of the outside is cut off and how long the person stays in that state. But where does boredom really begin? One of the most common types of outside input is social interaction. And to most people, life will not be pleasant without it. But it is still the weakest part of boredom and can be overcome pretty easily. Many people isolate themselves of their own volition, either for a challenge, to seek enlightenment, or simply because they are scared of the world. It is not usually too difficult to entertain yourself by yourself, but sometimes there is almost no satisfying way to do so. And what will likely happen is that you will cling onto any semblance of human contact. That is what makes solitary confinement so potent. And I believe that no other media puts it better than presentable liberty. This brilliant game makes you the prisoner in the cell, and then adds even more by paradoxically cutting everything down to the point where only dread remains. You have been quite literally bought by an individual who goes by the name of Dr. Money, and put in a tiny cell where the only thing you have is a bed, and your only lifeline are letters that get delivered by a seemingly invisible no one with which the story of the game is told. It masterfully uses boredom and isolation to get you excited about every new letter that will likely tell you about the sad state of the world outside of your cell, a deadly virus taking over the world, the only cure being sold turning out to have a severe side effect of making all your vital organs fail, despair, and eventual demise of everyone you called a friend. The wait for every letter seems endless, with the only thing that keeps you from quitting being a few minigames that are sent to you through the same mail. But even they radiate a grey misery and sadness, being also extremely bare bones and not that fun, which makes you stay just on the edge of complete boredom. And all this, with how overall dark the game gets, creates a beautifully soul crushing story that still affects me to this day. And boredom is what makes it possible. But that is only the first step of the staircase. There's a special type of torture that has been documented to be used in various parts of the world, most prominently Iran and USA. It can cause long-lasting mental trauma, which causes hallucinations, psychosis, impairment of fundamental cognitive functions like memory and basic problem solving, emotional instability, and even weakness of the immune system. Most of the time, it is referred to as white torture. Usually, a person is placed within a complete white cell. All the clothes they are given are white as well as their food. The lights are positioned above on the ceiling in such a way that no shadows appear. The cell is perfectly soundproofed. The only sound there is comes from the occupant, and even the guards stand on duty in complete silence, wearing shoes padded so that when they walk they won't produce any sound. Usually the only food the person is given is unseasoned white rice. Often they are held like this for months or even years, and it usually leads to loss of identity and feeling of self in general. But USA took it to an even higher extreme. There was a temporary detention facility in Guantanamo Bay called Camp X-Ray. It was set up to hold individuals captured during the War on Terror, particularly those suspected of being associated with Al Qaeda and the Taliban. In there, the detainees were subjected to awful conditions, including torture. One of the methods being the previously mentioned white torture, if you can even call it that at this point. Prisoners were forced to put on eye covers that would cut out all the light, earmuffs with the same level of efficiency, face masks, and thick gloves that were then tied together, leaving them in complete darkness, with no smell, nothing to hear, and only the gloves to feel on their skin. A cruel punishment for a crime that often didn't happen. This way of torture has been forbidden by multiple conventions since at least 1945. The last documented case was in 2006, and it likely is still in use today. In the grim darkness of the future, there is only war. War between many races, none of them truly sympathetic. But for me, the Necrons stand out as one of the most interesting, specifically for their origin and relation to feelings and boredom. They were at first a race called Necrontyr. They were a race like any other, with skin and weak fleshy bodies, that lived short lives filled with suffering and pain, most brought on by the star they lived under. It was so radioactive, it made them constantly sick from its rays. Almost like an abusive parent, it made their lives short and miserable. In an attempt to save at least their children, they invented interstellar travel and left their cruel home world in search of more hospitable ones. And they did find them, but the curse of their son still followed them. Children born on the new worlds still suffered the same fate. Their lives were short and painful. The Necrontyr went into a deep despair, and in such a dark moment they saw who they thought would be their savior. The Old Ones, a race of gods with unimaginable power to create life. The Necrontyr came to the Old Ones and pleaded to save them and their children. But the gods declined even though it would cost them nothing to help. The Old Ones wanted to spread life everywhere in the galaxy, but they have elected to not interfere beyond that. Necrontyr, blinded by anger from such a rejection, declared war on these seemingly indifferent gods. Technologically, inferior Necrontyr had no chance, and all their attacks were pointless. The Old Ones went no further than to defend themselves from it. But their opponents didn't care. They fought relentlessly, even when they couldn't achieve anything even remotely resembling a victory. But the tides were turned when the Necrontyr met another god race, the C'tan, ones who devoured the very stars. One thing the two races had in common was their deep hatred for the Old Ones. One of the C'tan came to the Silent King, the Necrontyr leader, with a proposal that would change the course of Necrontyr and galaxy's history forever. They would help them in the war against the Old Ones. and also cure them of the curse of their home sun by replacing their sick and fragile bodies with new metal ones. They would also provide them with technology so powerful that a map capable of erasing any object in existence was deemed weak in comparison. The Silent King, in a moment of naivety, agreed. Giant furnaces were constructed on every Necrontyr inhabited planet. The first to step into one of them was the Silent King himself. His flesh burnt away as his consciousness was placed into a new, immortal body. Immediately, he felt that something wasn't right. Something was missing. It was his soul. Soul of every single person to step into a furnace was quietly eaten by the C'tan. A person stepped in, an obedient, unfeeling machine stepped out. They were built to obey their leader. That night, the Necrontyr died, and the Necron were born. Only a lucky few would keep their individuality in this process. That's when the true war began. A war so unimaginably big, it is now called the War in Heavens. A war between gods, in which quintillions died every day. After some time, the Old Ones and most of their creation were eradicated. When it all ended, the Silent King didn't wait long to turn his wrath to those who gave him the ability to win the war. The Necrons wanted revenge. Revenge for their betrayal. Revenge for what was done to them. The unsuspecting C'tan were dealt with quickly and ended up with their forms shattered into tiny shards. With no enemies, the terrible regret of losing their souls and bodies has set in, and it would follow them like a terrible ghost. No body, no feeling, no soul. Only an eternity as an undead robot. It is not the end of their story, but I will not go much further, as to not make this a Warhammer lore video. They now exist, most trying to return what was taken from them and restore themselves. Meanwhile, many go insane in many gruesome ways. For example, there is something we might call a virus going through their ranks. Those affected are called the cursed or the flayed ones. The infection starts off pretty tame, like picking up a small sample of flesh from the battlefield and shoving it into the mouth, imitating slit in their faces. Trying to eat, ignoring that they not only have no need for such sustenance, but also the fact that their body doesn't even absorb it. And so it just sits there, rotting. As soon as they are noticed by the unaffected, they are immediately exiled. They start to cover themselves in flesh and turn almost into a walking pile of gore. At some point, they lose themselves in this craving and seemingly become primitive, mindless machines that only want to tear apart and consume flesh. They also develop an ability to tear through space and frequently appear out of nowhere to aid those who exiled them. The unaffected Necrons usually think the cursed are no longer the same people they used to be. But after some research, it was realized that the flayed ones just lost the ability to speak like normal. And after taking an effort to understand them, the Necrons realized that the Flayed still hold a deep love for their people and are still loyal to their brethren. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, there's the Destroyer cult. A group of Necrons who are happy that they lost their bodies and now despise everything organic and go around the galaxy leaving no life behind. They are hated by the majority of the Necron society, who are still hoping to find a way to put themselves into flesh. So the Necrons are a race of people who were left with no soul, no body, and no sensation of their own selves, struggling with boredom and going insane because of it. But they have something crucial that keeps at least some of them together. The ability to act is what everybody has. It can be said that our actions is what defines our existence. Anytime you're bored, you simply do something. But what if that's not an option? What if you're tied up and cannot move? How long would it take for a person to lose their mind in the agony of such pure boredom? Well, the answer is kind of weird. I can say it takes about 6 microseconds, but also an eternity. The Jaunt by Stephen King presents us with the reality where, in the 26th century, humanity has long since conquered the solar system, has almost no need for oil and other fossil fuels, all thanks to the story's namesake technology, called, as you've probably guessed, the Jaunt. A two-way portal that only takes 6 microseconds to transfer anything, from a pencil to a human. This way, there is almost no need for other ways of transportation. But there was one catch, figured out in the initial discovery of the technology back in the 80s. When an actual living creature is being transported, like a mouse, they would become apathetic and unresponsive, just staring into nowhere and dying soon after. After some testing, it was understood that if a creature was sent sleeping, it was fine and lived fine after. Now every time a human jaunts, they inhale a gas to go to sleep. And so the problem was solved, it seems. And so the problem was solved, it seemed. But the human curiosity has no bounds. It always wants to know why. So the United States government picked one death row inmate, a killer, to send him through the jaunt awake in exchange for a full pardon if he survives the process. He did, but was only able to say 5 words before falling to the floor from a heart attack. It's an eternity in there. The terrifying reality of such a thing, only 6 microseconds for a body, and an eternity for the mind. An eternity spent in dark silence with nothing to do. Only 6 microseconds. After such a terrifying discovery, some dark minds used it in ways it was never meant to. A psycho throwing his lover into a jaunt with no end destination, infinite torture with no end. Mafia doing the same to dispose of thankfully already dead victims. A landfill with no way to find what is thrown in there. A little boy who had gotten a little too curious when jaunting to Mars with his family. I saw it! I saw it, Dad! It's longer than you think, Dad! Longer than you think! I held my breath when they were giving me the sleeping gas, and I saw it! Yelled out the boy while he was rolled away on a hospital bed. But even there, it doesn't truly last forever. There is still a relief that everyone who came out of the portal has. No matter what happens, no matter what horrific trauma a person experiences, it will end. It will all end relatively soon. But what if we were denied that release? What if there was no end? What if the end isn't going to come? In the brilliant story of Katana Zero, such an idea is explored in all its terrifying colors. The game takes place in the dystopian country of New Mecca. Gangs, drugs, prostitution. A government that doesn't care about its own citizens, let alone other countries. The main character, Zero, is an assassin who has lost his memory and doesn't remember who he is or seemingly almost anything from his past. The only point to his life seems to be going to his therapist, who is also his boss, who seems to be helping him with his trauma, administering him medicine. And giving him targets to eliminate at the end of every session. Throughout the game, he kills or just meets many people. From whom he gets information to slowly piece together his past and his nature. He starts to see that every target is suspiciously connected to a certain substance, Chronos, a drug. That seems to make time slow down and repeat. A drug that even on the streets of a city like this has no equal in the horror that follows if you allow it to take you. Turns out that it's not even an illusion, and the medicine given to Zero every session is actually Chronos. If you train, you can learn to use the drug to control time and to always beat any opponent with barely any effort. But it seems that the earlier you start to take the drug and train, the better you become at using it. The government saw an opportunity in this, and that's how the Null program began. Zero, taken in as a child because of his psychopathic tendencies, being likely its biggest success. They were used to win a war with a country of people who they simply considered lesser than them. The genocidal war was almost won, but New Mecca was forced to withdraw due to protest from the populace after the people found out about civilian killings and other war crimes. With the war ending, the government saw no more use for the Nulls, and most were left to die as junkies. But there was one problem. The moment you take Chronos, you're not only immediately addicted, but also you will die the moment the substance in your blood runs out. At least that's what it looks like from the outside. For you, time stops, and you continue to live for an eternity as a ghost in the single moment, without any company, with no feeling, completely, with nothing to do, and not even death is there to save you. Every Null is an invincible god, used like a toy by corrupt mortals seeking power, cursed to suffer for an eternity, the moment its days run out. No horror is worse than that of the eternity. No other story has ever shaken me more than this one. So, this has been a trip. I hope you liked it. If you did, do share your thoughts down below, and if you so please, press the other two buttons as well. I've been happy to share all this, and hope to see you here again. Some of the things I said may be a bit inaccurate, and any corrections will be appreciated and added with credit to the comment that I've pinned down below. Goodbye for now.